Right, welcome back, everybody. Today, South Africa commemorates its annual Reconciliation Day. This gives us an opportunity to reflect on the nation's milestones, how far we have come, and how much still needs to be done. Well, joining us now in studio is Moyo-Kupeta. She is from the Center of the Study of Violence and Reconciliation in South Africa. It's good to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you.
I was just having a look back at the whole reason of Reconciliation Day here in South Africa and its origins. I mean, talk to us about that. Where does it all come from?
Well, when we speak of reconciliation, we are looking at a process that people or nations or different sectors of society engage in after having been at loggerheads for some time. And looking at South Africa's history during the apartheid era, I mean, we had different sectors of society, we had different races being at loggerheads. We were not at war necessarily, but there were definitely differences that we needed to address. Reconciliation that speaks to the coming together, the bringing together, the integration of the different sectors of society, the different races, and the different people who were not together before. So this is where we are at. This is what even national policies that were put in place post-apartheid meant to achieve.
How are we doing? 20 years down the line, how is South Africa? If we have to have a scorecard in terms of reconciliation, where are we at?
We have made some major, we have made some milestones, we have achieved some major feats towards our reconciliation. When you look at what we have done, for instance, we have actually put in place policies to try and address and deal with some of the injustices of the past. We have actually achieved, to a larger extent, interracial integration, interracial communications, interracial actions, and also we have actually managed to pull down some of the divides, the racial divides and the social divides that existed during the apartheid era. Although we have managed to actually achieve so much as well as a country, I mean, we have also worked towards national unity, but there are still some dents to our reconciliation. There are still some things that do put a dent on our reconciliation as a nation. Yeah. When we look at such issues like the high levels of inequality in our society, the social exclusion that still exists where the poor remain poor and the rich also become even richer. So the social divide between the poor and the rich is still very wide. And the poor still bear the brunt of poor service delivery. They still bear the brunt of what used to exist before. I mean, on the ground, they still feel aggrieved, they are frustrated because for them, the situation has not changed much. They haven't seen the reconciliation or rather the progression towards making sure that we cover the divide or we bridge the gaps between the social exclusions that existed before.
I mean, we still look at incidences and we can just talk about a couple. A few weeks back in Cape Town, a white man beat up a domestic worker for mistaking her for a prostitute. Last Friday, the University of Pretoria accepted an apology of two students who painted their faces black, mocking domestic workers. Then another Cape Town man recently fined 50,000 rand because he called a domestic worker the K-word. You know, there are still so many incidences happening here on a daily basis in South Africa. How deep are these stereotypes entrenched that, we need reconciliation and that we need to, we need to move forward as a nation?
The divides that we're speaking of, the stereotyping, this is what actually still affects some of the sectors in our society. For instance, poor people. I mean, there is a lot of stereotyping that a black poor man is the perpetrator of violent crimes that we see in our society. Yeah. They are the ones who actually bear the brunt of what used to be or what the previous system used to they're still being targeted by the very same system that used to target them before we achieved democracy. So there is still that divide, that social divide that we need to cover. So the stereotyping is still very entrenched in our society. Some sectors of society are still being seen as perpetrators of specific crimes in our society. They're still being looked down upon, or some of the jobs that we have in our society, the lower paying, the lower grade jobs are still being seen as jobs that are done by a specific sector in our society. So there is that stereotyping. Even crime, when you look at some of the high-profile cases that we've dealt with even this year, you see that a poor black man is actually the first person who would be suspected of having committed a crime.
Yeah.
And also, even if you look at also the people who will then be targeted by the police in terms of people who would be suspects in having committed a crime, it's usually your poor black man on the street or the poor black youth who is suspected of having committed a crime. So there hasn't been some changes in some areas, but there has been also major strides that we have achieved in other areas. So our reconciliation has not yet been complete. We still have some gaps that still need to be covered.
Indeed, it certainly does. I mean, you look around the world and it's still an issue in most countries. I mean, I think you just have to turn on your television and see what's happening in the United States as well. And the reconciliation there is also still a major, major issue. I'd love to talk more, but I think you've given us a great idea of how far we've come as a nation. Talking to us here on Morning Live, Anna Moyo-Kupeta. She's from the Centre for Violence and Reconciliation of South Africa. Thank you so much for coming in on this public holiday and talking to us about such an important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's take